The rain began as a whisper over Lagos, but within minutes, the sky tore open. Water flooded the streets, swallowed the sidewalks, and turned the deserted bus stop into a cold shelter for a pregnant woman no one seemed willing to notice. Amara sat curled against the metal bench, her thin cotton dress soaked and clinging to her swollen belly. Water streamed through her hair and down her exhausted face as she pressed one hand to her aching back and the other protectively over her unborn child. "Easy," she whispered through trembling lips. "Mama is here." At 25, Amara had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. She loved books, fresh notebooks, and the sound of chalk moving across a classroom board. But life had taken everything before giving her a chance. Illness claimed both her parents within a year. Unpaid rent cost her their small room. Then the man who had promised to love her forever disappeared the moment she revealed she was pregnant. "I'm not ready," he had said before walking away. The baby kicked beneath her palm, and despite the storm, Amara managed a faint smile. "You're ready though, aren't you?" Cars rushed past, their tires cutting through deep puddles and throwing dirty water toward the pavement. No one slowed down. No one looked twice. Lagos did not pause for homeless women, abandoned mothers, or people whose lives had already fallen apart. But before the night ended, one powerful stranger would finally stop, and the lonely pregnant woman everyone ignored would become the center of a life-changing secret neither of them was prepared to face. Amara pulled her knees closer to her chest, though it did little to protect her belly. Her stomach growled loudly, a sharp, hollow reminder that she had eaten nothing but a piece of bread since morning. She tried to ignore it. Hunger was easier to endure than shame. Hours earlier, she had stood outside a small restaurant watching customers laugh and eat. The smell of fried rice and grilled chicken had made her dizzy. For a moment, she had considered asking for leftovers, but pride, fragile and stubborn, had kept her silent. Now pride offered no warmth. Thunder rolled across the sky, low and threatening. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the street for a split second, turning everything silver. That was when she saw it. Something dark lying near the edge of the road. First, she ignored it. Probably trash, she thought. Lagos streets collected all kinds of forgotten things, but as the lightning flickered again, the object caught the light differently. Leather. She squinted through the rain. Slowly, carefully, she pushed herself up from the bench. Her legs protested. Her back screamed. She placed one hand beneath her belly and stepped toward the road. Cars were fewer now. She walked closer, rain stinging her eyes. It was a wallet, black, smooth, expensive-looking, half submerged in a shallow puddle. Her heart began to pound. She looked left, then right. No one seemed to be searching for it. No frantic footsteps. No shouts. She bent down with effort, her knees wobbling as she picked it up. Felt heavy, too heavy for an empty wallet. Her breath caught. For a long moment, she simply held it in her hands, rainwater dripping from its edges. Then, almost against her own will, she opened it. Her world froze. Inside were crisp stacks of Naira notes, fresh, neatly arranged, bound in bands. She stared. The amount was more than she had seen in years. More than enough to rent a small room for months. Enough to buy baby clothes, a crib, food, medical checkups. Her fingers trembled. The rain faded into the background. The noise of the city disappeared. All she could hear was her own heartbeat. "This is survival." A voice whispered in her mind. "No one would know. No one saw you pick it up. You need this. Your baby needs this." Her eyes burned, not from the rain this time. She imagined walking into a pharmacy and buying prenatal vitamins without counting coins. She imagined sleeping indoors on a mattress instead of cold concrete. She imagined holding her newborn in safety. The temptation was suffocating. She closed the wallet quickly, pressing it against her chest as if that would quiet her thoughts. "God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why now?" Her baby shifted again. Amara lowered herself back onto the bench, breathing heavily. She reopened the wallet slowly, forcing herself to look at everything inside. There were cards neatly arranged in slots, bank cards, membership cards, then an identification card. She pulled it out carefully. A man stared back at her from the glossy surface, well-groomed, confident, probably around 30. His suit alone looked like it cost more than everything she had ever owned. Ethan Cole. The name was printed boldly beneath the photograph. Below that was an address. She blinked. She knew that area. Everyone did. The wealthy district on the island. Tall gates, private security, streets so clean they looked unreal. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just someone with money. This was someone powerful. Her eyes drifted back to the stacks of cash. He won't even miss it, the whisper returned. But you will, another voice answered quietly inside her. Amara stared at her reflection in the rainwater pooling at her feet. A soaked, exhausted pregnant woman with nowhere to sleep. If she kept it, she could change everything. But what would she tell her daughter one day? That survival required stealing? That integrity only mattered when you were comfortable? She imagined holding her baby girl in the future. What kind of mother would I be? She murmured. The rain began to soften. The storm was moving on. She looked at the ID again. Ethan Cole. Her jaw tightened. This isn't mine, she said firmly. The words steadied her. She gathered what little strength she had left and tucked the wallet safely under her dress, protecting it from the rain. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would go to that address. Her legs nearly gave out as she stood again. The walk would be long. The island was far. She had no transport money, but something inside her felt lighter, not because her problems were solved, but because she had chosen who she wanted to be. She shuffled back under the bus stop shelter and sat down carefully. The rain slowed to a drizzle, then to scattered drops. The storm had passed. Cars continued driving by, unaware that under that flickering streetlight, a quiet battle had just been won. Amara leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her stomach still growled, her body still ached, her future was still uncertain, but her heart was calm. She placed a gentle hand over her belly. We'll return it tomorrow, she whispered softly, and somehow we'll be okay. Above her, the clouds parted slightly, revealing a sliver of moonlight, and though she did not know it yet, that small decision, made in hunger, in loneliness, in the cold, would change her life forever. Morning in Lagos did not rise gently. It burst into existence. The sun climbed fast and unforgiving, replacing the night's cool rain with thick humidity that clung to skin and pressed against lungs. By the time the city fully stirred awake, Amara had already been walking for nearly an hour. Her dress, though dried from the storm, still carried faint stains of mud at the hem. The wallet was tucked securely inside a small nylon bag she had found, wrapped in cloth to protect it. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the stacks of money again, the possibility, the escape, and every time she reminded herself, it is not yours. Her swollen feet protested with every step. Blisters burned beneath her worn sandals. Her back throbbed in sharp pulses that made her stop occasionally to breathe through the pain. You're strong, she whispered to herself. The baby shifted inside her, almost as if hawkers shouted. Conductors hung from bus doors yelling destinations. The city was alive, loud, impatient, relentless. Amara moved through it like a ghost. As she transitioned from crowded mainland streets toward the bridge leading to the island, the scenery slowly began to change. The roadside stalls thinned. The air felt cleaner. The potholes became smoother roads. Buildings grew taller. Glass replaced rusted zinc. By the time she reached the wealthy district printed on the ID card, the difference was almost surreal. The streets were wide and quiet. Tall palm trees lined the sidewalks. Security cameras were mounted at intervals. Each property was shielded by towering gates, some made of polished steel, others of dark wood with intricate carvings. This was another world. Amara stopped walking. For the first time since leaving the bus stop, doubt crept in. What if they chased her away? What if they accused her of stealing it? What if they didn't even let her explain? She pulled the ID card from the nylon bag again and read the address carefully. No mistake. She stood before a massive black gate embossed with a subtle silver emblem, C intertwined with a crown. Her throat tightened. Beyond the gate, she could glimpse a long driveway lined with manicured hedges. At the far end stood a mansion so large it barely looked real. White stone walls, tall glass windows, balconies framed with sleek railings. She had never seen a home like that outside television. A small security booth stood to the side of the gate. 2 uniformed guards noticed her immediately. Their expressions changed from neutral to suspicious within seconds. One stepped forward. "Can we help you?" His tone wasn't welcoming. Amara swallowed. I need to see Mr. Ethan Cole." The guard glanced at her from head to toe. The faded dress, the pregnancy, the tired eyes. "For what?" I found something that belongs to him. The second guard laughed quietly under his breath. The first guard crossed his arms. And what would that be? She hesitated, then carefully pulled the wallet from her bag. The guard's posture shifted slightly. Where did you get that? I found it on the road last night. They exchanged a look. Wait here, the first guard said. He disappeared into the booth and made a call. Amara stood under the blazing sun, her palms damp, not from heat but nerves. Minutes felt like hours. She shifted her weight to ease the pressure on her feet. The guard returned. Stay there, he instructed. The large black gate began to slide open slowly, smoothly, revealing more of the pristine driveway. A sleek black Rolls-Royce was approaching from inside. Amara's breath caught. The car glided forward and stopped just behind the gate. The rear door opened and he stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. Dark sunglasses shielded his eyes from the sun. His movements were controlled, confident, the kind of confidence built from always being in charge. Ethan Cole. Even without the ID, she would have known he was important. He removed his sunglasses slowly as his gaze landed on her. Confusion flickered across his face, then mild irritation. Is there a problem? He asked the guards. Sir, one replied. She claims she found something that belongs to you. Ethan's eyes shifted back to Amara. For the first time, he really saw her. The pregnancy, the exhaustion, the tremor in her hands. She stepped forward carefully, holding out the wallet. I believe this is yours, sir. He frowned slightly and took it from her. His fingers stilled the moment he recognized it. He opened it quickly. His eyes scanned the contents. The cash was untouched. The cards intact. Even the ID was placed neatly back where it belonged. He looked up at her again. You found this? Yes, sir. Where? By the roadside near 3rd Mainland Bridge. He inhaled sharply. He had stepped out of his car briefly the previous night to take a call. He must have dropped it then. He glanced back down at the wallet, then at her again. You didn't take anything? She shook her head. It wasn't mine. The simplicity of her answer unsettled him. He studied her face, searching for deception. There was none. Only quiet dignity. You understand how much is in here? He asked. Yes. And you still brought it back? She hesitated for a second, not because she regretted it, but because explaining temptation felt too personal. My mother used to say that the only thing a poor person truly owns is their name. She said softly. If I take what isn't mine, I lose even that. The guards fell silent. Ethan's grip on the wallet tightened. In his world, people lied for contracts, betrayed partners for profit, fought lawsuits over percentages. Integrity was negotiable, yet here stood a homeless pregnant woman who had chosen honesty over survival. He felt something shift in his chest, unfamiliar and uncomfortable. What's your name? He asked. Amara. He nodded slowly. The sun beat down mercilessly, yet she stood without complaint. How far did you walk? She hesitated. From the mainland. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That was no small distance. You could have kept it, he said quietly. I thought about it, she admitted. His gaze sharpened, but it would not have felt right. A breeze moved faintly between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Ethan was not used to being speechless, yet here he was. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a thick stack of cash. Take this, he said. Her eyes widened. No, the word came out quickly. It's a reward. I didn't return it for a reward. The firmness in her voice surprised even her. The guards shifted awkwardly. Ethan stared at her, trying to understand her. You're pregnant, he said quietly. You need help. I need work, she corrected gently, not pity. Something in him reacted to that. Pride, strength, self-respect. Most people begged around him. She refused charity. He lowered the money slowly. Wait here, he said. He turned and walked back toward the car, deep in thought. The guards watched her differently now. Less suspicion, more curiosity. After a minute, Ethan returned, this time without the sunglasses. His expression had changed, less guarded. Amara, he said, stepping closer to her. Have you ever worked in a private residence before? She blinked. Yes, sir. I cleaned houses when I was younger. My mansion requires additional staff. Her heart skipped. He continued, voice steady. Room, food, salary, medical care. Her throat tightened. I don't give handouts. He added, you would earn it. The world seemed to pause. She had walked here expecting nothing but a closed gate and maybe a polite thank you. No, I don't want charity. She whispered again just to be sure. This isn't charity, he said. It's employment. Her mind raced. A roof, food, safety for her baby, dignity intact. The baby kicked suddenly. Tears stung her eyes. I will work hard, she said. I have no doubt, he replied. He turned to the guards. Open the gate. The massive black gate slid open fully this time. Amara stepped forward, slowly crossing from the scorching public road into the cool, shaded driveway. Felt like stepping into another life as the gate closed behind her with a soft, mechanical hum. She glanced back once at the street she had walked from. She did not know what awaited her inside that mansion. She did not know that this single decision would entangle her fate with the man walking beside her. All she knew was that yesterday she had been homeless in the rain and today a door had opened. The mansion did not feel real as the gates closed behind her with a soft mechanical hum. Amara instinctively flinched, half expecting someone to call her back and say there had been a mistake, but no one did. The driveway stretched wide before her, paved in smooth stone that gleamed under the morning sun. On either side stood carefully trimmed hedges shaped into perfect curves. A fountain sparkled near the center, water arching gracefully into a marble basin. She had never seen water used for decoration before. Ethan walked beside her with unhurried steps, as though bringing a soaked, pregnant stranger into his home was an ordinary occurrence. For him, maybe the world always bent this way. For her, it felt like stepping into a dream she did not trust. When they reached the entrance, the double doors opened before they touched them. A middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform stood waiting. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mrs. Lawson, Ethan replied. This is Amara. She'll be joining the staff. Mrs. Lawson's eyes moved gently over Amara, not with suspicion but assessment. Welcome, she said calmly. The foyer was enormous. Polished marble floors reflected light from a chandelier that hung like a cluster of stars above them. A grand staircase curved upward in elegant symmetry. Paintings lined the walls, abstract, expensive-looking pieces that made Amara afraid to breathe too hard. She became acutely aware of her sandals leaving faint, dusty prints on the floor. I'm sorry, she murmured, instinctively trying to wipe them with her foot. Mrs. Lawson gave a small smile. We have cleaners for that. The irony made Amara swallow. Ethan turned to Mrs. Lawson. Please arrange a room for her in the East Wing and have the clinic on standby to schedule prenatal care. Amara's head snapped up. Sir, that's not necessary. It is, he said gently but firmly. You work here now. Your health matters. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. No one had said those words to her in a long time. Mrs. Lawson nodded. I'll see to it. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Amara. I have meetings, he said. Mrs. Lawson will explain everything. If you need anything, let her know. She nodded quickly. Thank you, sir. He studied her for half a second longer, as if trying to understand why returning a wallet still lingered in his mind more than his business notifications, then turned and disappeared down a hallway. And just like that, she was alone in a billionaire's mansion. The East Wing felt quieter, softer. Mrs. Lawson led her down a corridor lined with tall windows that overlooked a garden bursting with flowers. The air inside was cool. Air conditioning, Amara realized, a luxury she had not experienced in months. This will be your room, Mrs. Lawson said, opening a door. Amara stepped inside. It was larger than the room she had once shared with both her parents. A neatly made bed stood against one wall, a wardrobe, a small desk, private bathroom, a bathroom with running water. She walked slowly toward the bed, touching the clean white sheets as if they might dissolve. You will begin with light duties, Mrs. Lawson continued, organizing the library, assisting with inventory, helping in the kitchen when needed. No heavy lifting. Amara nodded, still taking it in. And Mrs. Lawson added gently, you are not to overexert yourself. Mr. Cole is very particular about that. That surprised her. Thank you, she whispered. When Mrs. Lawson left, the silence felt overwhelming. Amara closed the door and leaned against it. Then she cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that slid down her cheeks as months of fear loosened their grip. She walked to the bathroom and turned the faucet hesitantly. Clear water flowed instantly. She laughed softly in disbelief. An hour later, after showering and changing into a simple uniform Mrs. Lawson had provided, she barely recognized herself. Clean, presentable, human again. When she looked in the mirror, she placed a hand over her belly. "We're safe," she whispered. Work began immediately. The mansion had more rooms than she could count. A formal dining hall large enough to host dozens, a home office bigger than most apartments, private gym, a cinema room, and the library. That was where she was assigned first. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls filled with books of every genre: business, history, philosophy, literature. She ran her fingers along the spines reverently. Books had once been her comfort. She began organizing according to the system Mrs. Lawson explained, moving slowly, carefully. By late afternoon, she felt a presence behind her. "You like books?" She nearly jumped out of her skin. Ethan stood near the doorway, sleeves rolled up, jacket removed. Without the formal stiffness of the morning, he looked younger. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly. "For what?" "I didn't hear you." He gave a faint smile. "That's not a crime." She relaxed slightly. "You like books?" he repeated. "Yes," she admitted. "I used to want to teach." "Used to?" "Life changed." He studied her quietly. "What did you want to teach?" "Literature." His eyebrow lifted. "Not business?" She shook her head softly. "Stories teach people how to survive." That answer lingered between them. He stepped into the room fully, glancing at the shelves. "Most of these I've never had time to read." She looked surprised. "Why buy them?" "Because they're supposed to be important." The honesty caught her off guard. Silence stretched for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. "You returned that wallet without hesitation?" he asked suddenly. She hesitated, not without hesitation. His gaze sharpened slightly. "I thought about keeping it," she admitted. "For a long time." He seemed almost relieved by that. "But I didn't," she added quietly. He nodded once. "I lost it after stepping out of my car for 5 minutes. Careless mistake." She smiled faintly. "It happens. Not usually to me." There was something almost vulnerable in the way he said it. She studied him briefly. This man who commanded boardrooms yet seemed oddly reflective here. "You work too much," she said before thinking. His eyebrows rose. She quickly lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. That was inappropriate." Instead of irritation, a small laugh escaped him. "No one talks to me like that." "That's because they're wise," she replied dryly. The humor surprised both of them. For the first time, he laughed fully, and something shifted. Not employer and staff, just two people. He glanced at her belly. "How far along?" 7 months. "Do you have a doctor?" She shook her head slightly. "You do now," he said simply. Her chest tightened again. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. He paused. "Because you didn't take the money. Because you reminded me of something I forgot. Because integrity still exists." He didn't say those things aloud. "Because good people are rare," he said instead. Their eyes met and neither looked away first. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the tall windows and painted the sky gold, Amara sat alone in her new room. The day had felt like weeks. She lay back carefully on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, she was not afraid of where she would sleep. For the first time, her baby would not hear traffic inches away through thin air. She closed her eyes. Down the hallway in his office, Ethan found himself distracted. He replayed her words. Stories teach people how to survive. He had built his empire on strategy and risk, but survival of the soul, that was something else entirely. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city skyline beyond his window. A homeless pregnant woman had walked into his life because he dropped a wallet, and somehow he felt like he had gained more than he had lost. In her small room, Amara turned on her side, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. "We'll do this right," she whispered to her unborn child. Outside, the mansion stood quiet and steady. Inside, two lives, once moving in completely different directions, had just begun to intertwine. Neither of them knew how deeply, not yet. The garden became their quiet place. It wasn't planned, it wasn't announced. It simply happened. 3 days after Amara began working in the mansion, she discovered the east garden during her afternoon break. It was tucked behind tall hedges and shielded from the main driveway. Private, peaceful, almost secret. White stone pathways curved between beds of roses and lilies. A small koi pond shimmered under the sun. At the center stood a wooden bench beneath a wide almond tree whose branches stretched like protective arms. Felt safe. That afternoon her back had been aching more than usual. 7 months pregnant made even light tasks exhausting. Mrs. Lawson had insisted she rest. So Amara found herself lowering carefully onto the bench, exhaling slowly as she adjusted her weight. She closed her eyes. The air smelled of flowers instead of car fumes. For the first time in a long while, her mind wasn't racing. "You disappear here often?" Her eyes flew open. Ethan stood a few feet away, jacket slung over one arm, tie slightly loosened. The late afternoon sun caught the sharp lines of his face, softening them. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly, attempting to rise. "Don't," he said immediately. "Sit, please." There was something almost rushed in his tone. She settled back down, slightly embarrassed. "I didn't mean to intrude," he added. "You didn't," she replied softly. "It's a beautiful garden." He glanced around as if seeing it for the first time. "I had it designed years ago. You don't use it much." It wasn't a question. He gave a faint smile. "I suppose not." He walked closer and sat at the opposite end of the bench, leaving respectful distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Birds chirped lightly in the trees. Water trickled in the pond. "You like quiet places," he observed. "I like places where I can think," she corrected gently. "And what do you think about?" She hesitated. "Everything I need to figure out." He studied her profile. "Such as?" She placed a hand over her belly instinctively. "How to raise a child without repeating the mistakes that hurt me." The honesty startled even her. Ethan leaned back slightly. "What mistakes hurt you?" he asked, voice softer now. She stared ahead at the garden. "My father worked too much. He thought providing money was enough." She swallowed. "He loved us, but he wasn't present." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "My mother carried everything alone," she continued. "And when they died, there was nothing left. No savings, no security." Silence lingered. "And the father of your child?" he asked carefully. Her hand stilled. "He wasn't ready," she said simply. There was no bitterness in her voice, just truth. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I see. Do you?" she asked gently, turning to look at him. Their eyes met. There was challenge there, not disrespectful, but real. "You work constantly," she said quietly. "You carry everything alone, too." His gaze sharpened. "That's different, is it?" The question hung between them like fragile glass. He looked away first. "You analyze me very confidently for someone who has known me less than a week." A faint smile touched her lips. "You asked." He couldn't argue with that. A breeze moved through the tree branches, scattering a few leaves at their feet. "I didn't build what I have by being balanced," he said after a while. She nodded thoughtfully. "But what are you building it for?" The question struck deeper than she intended. He had investors, boards, competitors, growth targets, but he had never paused to answer that. "For legacy," he said finally. "Legacy without warmth becomes loneliness," she replied. He looked at her sharply. "You speak like someone much older." She shrugged lightly. "Pain ages people." The simplicity of it unsettled him. For years his conversations had revolved around numbers, acquisitions, strategies. Even with friends, talk rarely drifted beyond business or status. But here was a woman who had slept on concrete and yet spoke of legacy and loneliness, as if dissecting the human condition. "You wanted to teach literature," he said slowly. "What was your favorite book?" Her eyes lit up. That change did something to him. "Things Fall Apart," she said immediately. He raised an eyebrow. "Because?" "Because it shows how pride, fear, and silence can destroy what strength alone cannot protect." He stared at her. "You relate to that?" "Everyone does," she replied. "Some just pretend they don't." He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. "And what do you think destroys strong men?" he asked. She held his gaze. "Isolation." The word landed softly but heavily. He didn't respond right away. The garden felt smaller suddenly, as if the conversation had narrowed the space between them. "You assume I'm isolated," he said. "You don't let people see you without control." she replied calmly. That's not isolation. That's discipline. It can become both. Silence. A long one. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed under his breath. You're bold. I'm honest. He nodded slowly. Yes, he admitted. You are. Another breeze passed. This one cooler. He noticed the slight shift in her posture, the way she pressed her hand more firmly against her lower back. You're in pain, he observed. It's fine, she said quickly. It's not. He stood immediately. She blinked. I'm okay, sir. Stop calling me sir when we're out here. The statement slipped out before he could filter it. They both froze. She tilted her head slightly. What should I call you? Ethan, he said. The way his name sounded in the open air felt intimate. She hesitated. That would be inappropriate. Why? You're my employer, and you're not my property, he replied. Her breath caught slightly at that. He extended his hand toward her. Let me help you inside. She looked at his hand for a long second, then placed hers in it. His grip was firm but careful, warm. As she stood, her balance faltered slightly, and instinctively, his other hand came to rest lightly at her waist to steady her. The contact lasted only a moment, but it lingered. They both felt it. He withdrew first. Inside the mansion, the air conditioning washed over them. Sit, he instructed gently, guiding her toward a nearby lounge chair in the sunroom. She obeyed reluctantly. He stepped back slightly as though realizing he had crossed some invisible line. You push yourself too much, he said. So do you, she countered softly. He almost smiled. Mrs. Lawson appeared briefly assessing the situation with quiet understanding before disappearing again without comment. Ethan remained standing for a moment, then sat opposite her. You don't treat me like other people do, he said. How do they treat you? Like I'm untouchable. She considered that. Untouchable things aren't loved, she said quietly. He inhaled slowly. You think I want to be loved? I think everyone does. Their eyes held again, this time longer. The air shifted, not employer and employee, not benefactor and beneficiary, just two human beings sitting across from each other in a room full of light. I should get back to work, she said softly, breaking the tension. You're resting, he corrected. She smiled faintly. You're very controlling, and you're very stubborn. A small laugh escaped her. The sound lingered in the room long after it faded. He stood. I have calls, he said. She nodded. As he reached the doorway, he paused. Amara. Yes, I'm glad you found that wallet. Her lips curved gently. So am he. Held her gaze 1 second longer than necessary, then left. Alone in the sunroom, Amara leaned back slowly. Her heart was beating faster than it should have from just walking. She placed her hand over her belly. Careful, she whispered to herself. Outside, the garden remained still, but something had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, just subtly, like the first crack in a wall that has stood too long, and neither of them was ready yet to admit that their conversations were becoming the most honest part of their days. Vanessa had never had to compete for attention in her life. She was the kind of woman who entered a room and expected it to adjust for her. Perfectly styled hair, designer heels that clicked with authority, a smile trained for cameras and charity galas, and for 2 years, Ethan Cole had been firmly within her orbit. Their relationship made sense on paper. Power and poise, wealth and elegance. They attended fundraisers together, appeared in magazines together, were photographed stepping out of luxury cars with synchronized grace. It worked until it didn't. The shift began subtly. Missed calls, shorter conversations, Ethan claiming he was busy even more than usual, but somehow sounding distracted instead of stressed. Vanessa noticed everything, and she did not like not being the center of focus. It was a bright Thursday afternoon when she decided to visit the mansion unannounced. She didn't need permission. She had never needed it before. Her white Range Rover rolled smoothly through the tall gates after the guards recognized her immediately. Good afternoon, ma'am, one greeted. She gave a brief nod, sunglasses still in place. As she stepped out of the car, she adjusted her fitted cream dress and smooth, invisible creases. She expected Ethan to meet her at the door. He didn't. That irritated her slightly. She entered the foyer confidently, heels echoing across the marble floors. Ethan? She called lightly. No answer. Mrs. Lawson appeared from a hallway. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Where is he?" Vanessa asked. "In the West Garden." Vanessa's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Garden? He's been spending time there lately." "Spending time? Since when did Ethan have time for gardens?" Curiosity sharpened into suspicion. "I'll find him," she said. The West Garden was quieter than the main one, bordered by tall hedges and flowering trees. Vanessa walked along the stone path, the sound of distant voices reaching her before the figures came into view. She slowed. There, beneath the wide almond tree, sat Ethan. Across from him, a pregnant woman in a simple uniform. They were laughing. Laughing? Ethan leaned slightly forward, relaxed, a version of him Vanessa rarely saw outside controlled environments. The woman said something softly. Ethan's expression softened in response. Something cold slid down Vanessa's spine. She stepped forward deliberately, letting her heels announce her presence. The conversation stopped immediately. Ethan looked up. "Vanessa." No warmth, just recognition. She forced a smile. "Darling, I didn't know you had company." Her gaze shifted to Amara, slowly, deliberately, taking in the uniform, the visible pregnancy, the quiet posture. Amara stood respectfully. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Vanessa didn't respond to her greeting. Instead, she looked at Ethan. "Who is she?" There it was, sharp, direct. Ethan stood. "This is Amara. She works here." "Works here?" Vanessa repeated, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes. As what? Staff." Vanessa folded her arms loosely. "And since when do you spend your afternoons having personal conversations with staff?" The air thickened. Amara lowered her eyes, sensing tension but refusing to shrink. "It was my break," she said gently. "I'll return to work." "No," Ethan said quickly. Vanessa noticed that immediate defense. She smiled again, but this one didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, please," she said lightly. "Stay. I wouldn't want to interrupt." Her tone made it clear she absolutely would. Ethan glanced at Amara briefly. "You can go inside if you like," he said quietly. Amara nodded. "Excuse me." As she walked past Vanessa, she felt the weight of her gaze like heat against her skin. Vanessa waited until Amara was out of sight. Then she turned fully toward Ethan. "What is going on?" "Nothing," he replied calmly. She laughed softly. "Don't insult me. It's exactly what I said. You're spending private time with a pregnant housekeeper. She's not just he." Stopped himself. Vanessa caught that too. "Not just what?" she pressed. He exhaled slowly. "She returned my wallet with a large amount of money inside. She could have kept it." Vanessa blinked. "That's why she's here?" "Yes." "So you rewarded her?" "I employed her." "That's not what I meant." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "You're overthinking this." "No," Vanessa said evenly. "I'm observing." She stepped closer. "You don't look at me that way anymore." He frowned. "What way?" "The way you were just looking at her." The accusation hung between them. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" He didn't answer immediately, and that silence told her more than words could. Over the next week, Vanessa visited more frequently, not affectionately, strategically. She watched. She noticed how Ethan's mood improved on days Amara worked near his office, how conversations in the dining room sometimes included quiet exchanges between them. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious, but something, and Vanessa felt it. One afternoon, she found Amara arranging flowers in the foyer. "You," Vanessa said sharply. Amara turned. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa walked slowly around her, inspecting. "You've become very comfortable here." "I'm doing my job. Are you?" Amara held her gaze respectfully but steadily. "Yes." Vanessa leaned slightly closer. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, ma'am." "And do you know how long I've been in Ethan's life?" "I don't believe that concerns me." The calm answer irritated her more than defiance would have. Vanessa's smile faded completely. "Let me give you advice," she said softly. "Men like Ethan get bored easily." Amara said nothing. They enjoy rescuing broken things. It makes them feel powerful. That stung, but Amara refused to show it. "I didn't ask to be rescued," she replied quietly. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "You think I don't see it? The soft conversations, the little smiles. There is nothing between us," Amara said honestly. "Yet, The word lingered dangerously. Vanessa straightened. You should remember your place. Amara inhaled slowly. My place is where I'm employed. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You're naive if you think this ends well for you. Amara's hand rested instinctively on her belly. I'm not here for anything except stability. For now, Vanessa said coldly. Footsteps approached. Ethan. Vanessa's expression transformed instantly into warmth. Darling, she said sweetly. Amara stepped back automatically. Is everything all right? Ethan asked, sensing tension. Of course. Vanessa replied smoothly. I was just getting to know your new employee. Ethan's gaze moved between them. Something in Amara's posture told him it hadn't been friendly. But Vanessa looped her arm through his casually. You've been distant lately, she said softly, leaning closer to him. I miss you. Amara turned away, focusing on the flowers. Ethan gently disengaged Vanessa's arm. I've been busy. With her? Vanessa asked, just loud enough. The silence that followed was dangerous. That's enough, he said firmly. Vanessa froze. He rarely used that tone with her. I don't appreciate insinuations, he added. Her eyes widened slightly, not hurt, but calculating. The balance was shifting. And she felt it. That night, Vanessa lay awake in her luxury apartment, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't jealousy alone that troubled her. It was loss of control. She had built her relationship with Ethan on alignment, status, ambition, image. But this woman, this pregnant, soft-spoken housekeeper, she wasn't competing in the same arena. She wasn't polished. She wasn't strategic. She was sincere, and that made her dangerous. Vanessa turned onto her side, jaw tightening. She had not spent 2 years building a future with Ethan Cole just to lose him to someone who walked in from the streets. If Amara thought she could quietly exist in that mansion without consequences, she was wrong. Very wrong. And somewhere in the quiet halls of the estate, beneath the calm routine of polished floors and trimmed hedges, the first true crack in the foundation had begun to form. Jealousy rarely explodes at first. It settles, it studies, it waits. Vanessa became quieter after that confrontation in the foyer, not calmer, quieter, and that frightened Amara more than sharp words ever could. The mansion moved in rhythms. Morning cleaning, afternoon quiet, evening dinners. But beneath that routine, something had shifted. Vanessa began appearing unexpectedly. Midweek mornings, late afternoons, even evenings when Ethan wasn't home. She walked through the house like an inspector. Her eyes observed everything and everyone, particularly Amara. One Tuesday afternoon, Amara was organizing files in the small administrative office Ethan had assigned her to assist with inventory records. Lighter work to accommodate her pregnancy. The desk phone rang. She picked it up. Cole residence. A pause. Then Vanessa's smooth voice flowed through the line. Is Ethan there? No, ma'am. He left for a meeting an hour ago. Another pause. Of course he did. The line went silent for a moment longer than necessary. Tell me something, Vanessa said lightly. Does he talk about me? Amara stiffened slightly. I don't think that's appropriate to discuss. A soft laugh echoed through the receiver. You're learning. The line disconnected. Amara exhaled slowly. Her heart was beating faster than it should have. She wasn't naive. She knew what Vanessa was doing. Testing boundaries, probing weaknesses, looking for cracks. Later that evening, Ethan returned home later than usual. Amara was in the kitchen finishing inventory paperwork when he walked in, loosening his tie. You're still up? He asked. Yes, she replied softly. Just finishing this. He noticed the slight tension in her posture. Something happened? She hesitated. Vanessa's voice echoed in her mind. Does he talk about me? It's nothing, she said finally. He stepped closer, leaning one hand against the counter. Amara, the way he said her name now carried weight. Not employer to staff. Something closer, Vanessa called. She admitted quietly. His jaw tightened almost immediately. What did she want? To know if you were home. And? I told her you weren't. He studied her face carefully. And what else? She hesitated. She asked if you talked about her. His expression darkened slightly. And what did you say? That it wasn't appropriate. Silence. A long one. I'm sorry, he said finally. She blinked. For what? For putting you in this position. You didn't, she replied gently. I'm simply here. He ran a hand over his face, frustration flickering beneath his calm exterior. You shouldn't have to deal with her insecurity. She has a reason to feel insecure, Amara said quietly. His eyes snapped to hers. Meaning? She sees something changing. The air shifted. And is something changing? He asked, voice lower now. Her breath caught. That was dangerous territory. I don't know, she answered honestly. He held her gaze for a long moment. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Then he stepped back. I need to handle this. She nodded, but neither of them knew yet how far it would go. Vanessa's insecurity evolved into strategy. She began showing up dressed impeccably, deliberately affectionate with Ethan in front of staff, touching his arm, standing too close, laughing louder than necessary. Amara noticed. She pretended not to, but pretending didn't make the sting disappear. One afternoon in the garden, Vanessa arrived mid-conversation. Ethan had been asking Amara about the baby's name. I was thinking of something simple. Amara had said softly. Something strong. Like? Ethan asked, before she could answer. Well, isn't this cozy? Vanessa's voice sliced through the air. Amara stood immediately. I should go. No, Vanessa said quickly. Stay. I'd hate to interrupt your bonding. The sarcasm was sharp. Ethan stood, irritation evident. Vanessa. She ignored his tone. Turning to Amara, she tilted her head slightly. Tell me. Do you enjoy playing the helpless card? Amara's fingers curled slightly at her sides. I don't play anything. Vanessa stepped closer. You walk around looking fragile and innocent. Men love that. That's enough, Ethan said firmly. Vanessa faced him. Is it? Or is it just uncomfortable to hear? His silence fed her anger. She turned back to Amara. You think because you returned a wallet you're special? Amara's voice remained calm. I never said that. You don't have to. The hatred in her tone was no longer subtle. Vanessa, Ethan warned. But the damage had already been done. Amara felt the weight of humiliation pressing against her ribs, not because Vanessa insulted her, but because deep down, she knew something was shifting, and that terrified her. I'll excuse myself, Amara said quietly. She walked away with dignity, though her hands trembled. That night, Vanessa confronted Ethan in his study. You are embarrassing me. He looked up from his laptop. How? By entertaining her. She's an employee. You don't look at employees like that. His jaw clenched. You're imagining things. Am I? Vanessa challenged. You've changed, Ethan. You're distracted. You're defensive. He stood slowly. I won't be accused in my own home. She laughed bitterly. Your home? Or ours? He didn't answer immediately, and that silence was louder than shouting. Vanessa's eyes filled with something colder than tears. You think she doesn't know what she's doing? She's done nothing. She's carrying another man's child. And you're stepping into something messy. His voice dropped lower. This conversation ends now. Vanessa stared at him, stunned. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing peace over paranoia. The words hit like a slap. Her expression hardened. You'll regret this, she said quietly. He didn't respond. That angered her more than if he had shouted. She walked out of the study with controlled steps. But inside, something broke, and something darker took its place. The next few days were eerily calm. Vanessa didn't visit, didn't call, didn't text. The absence felt heavier than her presence. Amara sensed it too. You look worried, Mrs. Lawson observed one afternoon. I'm fine, Amara replied. But she wasn't. There was a stillness before storms, and she had lived long enough to recognize it. That evening, as she folded small baby clothes Mrs. Lawson had quietly purchased for her, she felt her daughter move strongly inside her. Don't worry, she whispered, but she wasn't sure who she was, reassuring, the baby or herself? Across the city, Vanessa sat alone in her apartment staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had never lost, never been replaced, never been overlooked. And yet, a homeless pregnant woman had entered Ethan's life and shifted his attention in ways she couldn't control. Control, that was the word. Vanessa didn't fear love. She feared losing power. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the vanity table. If she disappears, she murmured softly to herself. Everything returns to normal. The thought settled. Heavy, dangerous. And for the first time, jealously turned into intent. Back at the mansion, Amara stood at the top of the grand staircase later that night, pausing to steady herself as a sudden wave of dizziness passed through her. She gripped the railing, breathing slowly, unaware that somewhere in the shadows of resentment, the seeds of hate had fully taken root. The day began too quietly. That was the first warning. The mansion felt still, unnaturally so. Even the usual morning rhythm seemed muted, like the house itself was holding its breath. Ethan had left early for a high-stakes investor meeting across town. He'd hesitated before leaving, glancing back toward the staircase where Amara stood carefully descending. "Call me if you need anything," he'd said. "I'll be fine," she replied gently. He'd lingered half a second longer than necessary. Then he left, and the gates closed behind him. By late morning, Amara was organizing fresh linens in the upstairs hallway. Her pregnancy had reached that heavy stage where movement required planning. She moved slowly, one hand often supporting her lower back. Despite everything, she had felt a strange sense of calm that morning. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was the fragile belief that Vanessa had finally stepped back. That illusion shattered at 11:17 a.m. The front doors opened downstairs. Heels, measured, familiar. Amara froze. Mrs. Lawson's polite greeting floated faintly upward. "Good morning, ma'am." "Vanessa." Amara's pulse quickened. She told herself to stay calm. Just do your job. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor, then up the staircase. Each step deliberate, controlled. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs like a storm dressed in silk. She wore a fitted red dress today, bold, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Her eyes scanned the hallway until they landed on Amara. There was no smile, no pretense, just cold clarity. "So," Vanessa said softly, "he isn't home." Amara straightened slowly. "Good morning, ma'am." "Drop the politeness," Vanessa replied sharply. "We're past that." The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. Amara placed the folded linens carefully on the nearby console table. "If you're looking for Mr. Cole, he left earlier." "I know." The words were precise, calculated. Vanessa took a few slow steps forward. "I chose today." The air thickened. Amara's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table. "Ma'am," she began gently, "I don't want any trouble." Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Trouble?" she echoed. "You walked into my life carrying it. I did nothing to you. You existed." Vanessa snapped. Silence fell between them, heavy, charged. "You think I don't see it?" Vanessa continued, voice rising slightly. "The way he looks at you, the way he defends you." Amara's heart pounded. "I never encouraged anything. You didn't have to." Vanessa stepped closer, too close. "He's drawn to broken things. It makes him feel noble." Amara flinched slightly at the word broken, but she didn't retreat. "I am not trying to take anything from you." Vanessa's expression twisted. "You already have." That was when the mask dropped completely. There was no elegance left, no socialite composure, just raw jealousy. "You think because you're carrying a child people should protect you?" Vanessa hissed. Amara instinctively placed a protective hand over her belly. "I'm asking you to leave me alone." Vanessa's gaze dropped to her stomach. Something dark flickered in her eyes. "Do you know what I sacrificed to stand beside Ethan?" she demanded. "Years, appearances, patience. I didn't ask for this," Amara whispered. "And yet here you are." Vanessa's hand suddenly shot out, grabbing Amara's wrist. The contact was sharp, unexpected. Amara gasped. "Let go," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Vanessa's grip tightened. "You think he'll choose you?" she demanded. "A pregnant housekeeper?" "I don't want him to choose anything," Amara said, struggling slightly. The movement made her lose her footing just a fraction, and in that split second, Vanessa shoved her hard. Time fractured. Amara's heel slipped against the polished floor. Her balance faltered. Her hand reached instinctively for the railing, missed. Her body tipped backward. The first step hit her shoulder, then her hip, then her back. The world became noise, wood, marble, paint. Her body tumbled down the grand staircase, striking edge after edge in horrifying rhythm. A scream tore from her throat, raw and instinctive. Then silence. She lay crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, unmoving. Vanessa stood frozen at the top, breathing heavily. For 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Reality crashed into her. "Oh God," she whispered. Footsteps echoed from outside. A car door slammed. The front doors opened. "Amara?" Ethan's voice, strong, clear. Then it stopped. He saw her at the bottom of the staircase. Blood, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. Still, everything inside him went cold. "What happened?" he demanded. Vanessa's voice trembled. She slipped. He didn't even look at her. He ran, dropped to his knees beside Amara. "Amara." His voice broke. Her eyelids fluttered faintly. A weak sound escaped her. Relief and terror collided inside him. "Stay with me," he whispered urgently. He touched her face gently. His hand came away, streaked with blood. Rage ignited instantly. He looked up. Vanessa stood halfway down the staircase now, pale, shaken. "I didn't mean to," she began. "You pushed her. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I was angry. You pushed a pregnant woman down the stairs." His voice had never sounded like that before. Controlled fury. The kind that vibrates in silence. Mrs. Lawson rushed in from the hallway, gasping at the scene. "Call an ambulance," Ethan ordered sharply. "No." He corrected himself instantly. "Forget it." He slid one arm carefully under Amara's shoulders, another beneath her legs. "Hold on," he whispered to her. Her hand weakly gripped his sleeve. "My baby," she breathed faintly. "She's okay," he said immediately, though he didn't know that yet. "She's okay." Vanessa stepped forward. "Ethan, please, don't," he warned without even turning toward her. The single word carried finality. He carried Amara out of the mansion himself. Every step felt like it was tearing through his chest. He placed her carefully in the backseat of his car and drove faster than he ever had before. The hospital blurred into motion. Doctors, stretchers, bright lights. 7 months pregnant. He told them urgently. She fell. He didn't say pushed. Not yet. They wheeled her away, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt completely powerless. He stood in the hospital corridor, hands stained faintly with her blood. His heart pounded violently. Minutes felt like hours. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes later. He saw her from the far end of the hallway, and something inside him shut down. She approached cautiously. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He stared at her like he no longer recognized her. "You could have killed them." Tears filled her eyes. "I lost control." "That's who you are when you lose control," he said coldly. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." But it did. Silence stretched. Then he said the words that ended everything. "We're done." Vanessa's breath hitched. "You don't mean that." "I do. You're choosing her. I'm choosing humanity." That was the final blow. Vanessa stood frozen as he turned away from her completely. She had lost, not to a rival, but to her own cruelty. Hours later, a doctor approached. "She's stable," he said. Ethan's knees nearly gave out in relief. "And the baby?" The pause felt endless. "The baby is alive. We'll monitor closely, but for now, both are stable." Ethan closed his eyes, exhaled. For the first time since walking through those doors, he could breathe. Inside the hospital room, Amara lay pale but conscious. When he entered quietly, she turned her head slightly toward him. "You came back," she whispered weakly. "I never left," he replied. And in that sterile, quiet room, with the storm finally broken, everything between them changed forever. Hospitals had a way of stripping life down to its rawest form. No marble floors, no status, no designer dresses, just white walls, bright lights, and the thin line between loss and relief. Ethan sat beside Amara's hospital bed, long after the doctors had assured him she was stable. The room hummed softly with machines. A steady monitor beeped in quiet rhythm, tracking her heartbeat. Another monitored the baby. He hadn't left, not even once. His jacket hung over the back of a chair. His sleeves were rolled up. His tie had been removed hours ago. He looked nothing like the composed billionaire who negotiated deals with precision. He looked like a man who had almost lost something he didn't know he needed. Amara stirred slightly. Her eyelids fluttered before slowly opening. For a brief moment, confusion clouded her gaze, then memory rushed back. The stairs, the push, the fall. Her hand flew instinctively to her belly. Ethan leaned forward immediately. "Easy," he said softly. "Don't move too fast." My baby. Her voice cracked. She's alive, he said quickly. Strong heartbeat. The doctors are monitoring her, but she's okay. Tears pooled instantly in her eyes. Not dramatic sobs, just silent relief spilling down her temples. Ethan reached out without thinking and gently wiped one away with his thumb. You scared me, he admitted quietly. She gave a weak, tired smile. I didn't mean to. The faint humor in her voice nearly broke him. You shouldn't be apologizing, he said, jaw tightening. Silence settled for a moment. The beeping of the monitor filled the space between them. Vanessa? She asked softly. He didn't hesitate. It's over. She blinked slowly. You ended it? Yes. Her brows furrowed faintly. You shouldn't have done that because of me. I didn't, he replied firmly. I did it because of what she did. He stood from the chair and walked toward the window briefly, needing space from the intensity in his chest. I saw it, he continued, voice lower now. I saw her push you. The room went quiet again. Amara closed her eyes briefly. I didn't want conflict, she whispered. I know, and I never meant to come between. You didn't come between anything, he interrupted gently. What we had was already breaking. She studied him carefully. You loved her. He didn't answer immediately. I loved who I thought she was, he said finally. The honesty in his tone made something shift inside her. And who did you think she was? Amara asked quietly, controlled, strategic, composed. He gave a faint, bitter smile. Safe. And I'm not safe? She asked softly. He turned back toward her. You're the most dangerous thing that's happened to me. Her breath caught. That's not comforting, she murmured. He moved back to the chair beside her bed and sat. It should be. She looked at him confused. You make me question everything, he explained. Why I work the way I do. Why I shut people out. Why I built walls and called them discipline. She swallowed. You don't owe me those realizations. Maybe I do. The air between them felt different now. Not just gratitude, not just protection, something deeper. Why did you stay? She asked softly. He frowned. What do you mean? You could have sent someone. You have staff. Drivers. Assistants. Her voice trembled slightly. But you carried me yourself. He didn't look away this time. Because when I saw you at the bottom of those stairs, his voice lowered. Nothing else mattered. Her heart skipped painfully. You matter, he said simply. The words landed heavy. Not grand. Not dramatic. Just true. She felt tears rise again. But she blinked them back. I'm just an employee, she whispered. He leaned forward slightly. You were never just anything. Silence fell again. But it wasn't tense. It was vulnerable. Ethan, she said softly. The first time she used his name in that hospital room, it made him still. I don't want to be a replacement, she continued carefully, or a rescue project. His jaw tightened faintly. You think that's what this is? I don't know what this is, she admitted. Neither did he. But he knew what it wasn't. It's not pity, he said firmly. And it's not obligation. He hesitated, then spoke the truth he'd been avoiding. It's choice. Her chest rose slowly with a deep breath. Choice? Yes. His eyes held her steadily. I choose to be here. The room seemed to shrink around them. The machines continued their quiet rhythm. Outside, nurses moved down the hallway, but inside, everything narrowed to this moment. You almost lost your daughter today, she said softly. Our daughter, he corrected instinctively. The words slipped out without calculation. They both froze. Her eyes widened slightly. You don't have to say that, she whispered. I want to. The sincerity in his tone left no room for doubt. I know she isn't biologically mine, he continued, voice steady. But that doesn't change how I feel. She felt something inside her unravel. Not fear, but protection she had wrapped around herself for months. You don't even know her yet, she said. I almost lost her, he replied. That was enough. A tear slid down her cheek. This time, he didn't wipe it away. He let her feel it. I don't know how to trust this, she admitted. He nodded. That's fair. I've lost too much already. I know. You don't, she whispered. He paused. You're right, he corrected softly. I don't know your pain, but I know I don't want to add to it. The humility in his voice made her chest ache. There was no arrogance, no dominance, just honesty. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Her fingers slid into his. His hand was warm, steady. "I won't rush you," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to," she replied. Another silence. But this one felt like beginning, not ending. After a while she spoke again. Did she seem sorry? He didn't hesitate. She seemed afraid. That answer told her everything. "Will she come back?" she asked. No. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. He wasn't angry anymore. He was resolved. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," he said quietly. She studied him. "That sounds like a promise." "It is." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. "You don't control everything," she said gently. "No," he agreed. "But I can control who has access to my life," and he had chosen. The door opened softly as a nurse entered to check the monitors. "Everything looks stable," she said with a smile. Relief washed over both of them again. When the nurse left, the room felt lighter. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair but didn't release her hand. "You should rest," he said. "You haven't slept." "I'm fine." She raised an eyebrow faintly. "You push yourself too much." He almost laughed. "You sound familiar." She smiled weakly. "Maybe we both need to learn." He studied her face, pale but strong. "You're not alone anymore," he said. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't grand declarations, but they carried weight. For months, she had prepared herself to raise her daughter alone, to struggle quietly, to survive. And now, she wasn't sure what the future looked like, but she wasn't facing it alone. Her eyes slowly began to close, exhaustion finally claiming her. He remained seated, still holding her hand as her breathing evened out. The hospital lights cast a soft glow over the room. Ethan watched her for a long time, not as a billionaire observing a responsibility, not as a man rescuing someone broken, but as someone who had just realized that the most valuable thing he had ever nearly lost wasn't money, wasn't reputation. It was the fragile, fierce woman sleeping beside him, and the child whose heartbeat had already tied their lives together in a way neither of them could undo. Outside the hospital window, the city continued as always, but inside that quiet room, a new beginning had already taken root. Recovery is slower than chaos. Chaos explodes. Recovery lingers. Amara remained in the hospital for 4 days. 4 days of monitoring. 4 days of nurses checking vitals. 4 days of Ethan refusing to leave her side for more than an hour at a time. The doctors called it precaution. Ethan called it necessary. By the 3rd day, the tension that had wrapped around her ribs began to loosen. The baby's heartbeat remained strong. No internal injuries. No complications beyond bruising and exhaustion. Physically, she would heal. Emotionally, that was quieter. On the 4th evening, the hospital room was washed in soft amber light from the setting sun. Amara sat upright now, pillows supporting her back. A tray of untouched food rested beside her. Ethan stood near the window, phone in hand, finishing a brief call. "Yes, move the meeting to next week," he said calmly. "No, I won't be available tomorrow either." He ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. "You're postponing everything," she observed gently. He turned toward her. "Yes, you don't have to. I want to." She studied him. "I don't want to become the reason your world slows down." He walked back to the chair beside her bed and sat. "My world needed to slow down," he said evenly. "You just forced me to see it." Silence lingered. She traced her fingers lightly over the hospital blanket. "Vanessa hasn't contacted you?" she asked. "No." "You're sure it's over?" "Yes." There was no hesitation, no regret in his voice, only finality. She exhaled softly. "I don't want to be the woman someone leaves for," she admitted quietly. He frowned. "You're not. It feels like that." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Vanessa didn't lose me because of you," he said. "She lost me because she showed me who she is." "And what am I?" Amara asked softly. He looked at her carefully before answering. "You're honest." She waited. "You're steady when you could be bitter." Her eyes lowered slightly. "You challenge me." A faint smile touched her lips. "That doesn't always end well." "For who?" he asked. "For powerful men." He almost laughed. "You still see me as that?" "You are." He shook his head lightly. Not here. The air felt intimate, stripped of titles, stripped of roles. Just two people navigating something neither had planned. Later that night, after the nurse dimmed the lights and the hallway quieted, Amara couldn't sleep. The hospital ceiling felt too white, too still. Her thoughts were louder in silence. "Ethan?" she whispered. He stirred immediately from the recliner where he'd insisted on staying. "I'm here." She hesitated. "I'm scared." He didn't brush it aside. Of what? Of trusting this. He stood and moved closer, lowering himself back into the chair beside her bed. "That's fair. I've trusted before. And it broke you." She nodded slightly. "Not just him," she said softly. "Life. Circumstances. Hope." He listened without interrupting. "I learned how to expect nothing," she continued. "It hurts less." He inhaled slowly. "I don't want to be something you expect nothing from. That's what makes it dangerous," she whispered. He reached for her hand again. This time she intertwined her fingers with his fully. "I don't promise perfection," he said quietly. "I don't promise I won't make mistakes." She appreciated that he didn't promise fantasy. "But I promise I will never treat you like you're disposable." Her throat tightened. "And my daughter?" she asked. "Our daughter," he corrected again, gently, intentionally. She didn't argue this time. "I won't disappear," he said firmly. "I won't wake up one day and decide I'm not ready." Her breath trembled. "Why?" she asked. "Because when I saw you fall," his jaw tightened slightly at the memory, "I realized losing you would destroy something in me I don't know how to rebuild." The vulnerability in his voice was unpolished. Rough. She squeezed his hand slightly. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough." "Such as?" He didn't hesitate. "You returned a wallet when you were starving." Her eyes softened. "You protect your child instinctively." She swallowed. "You don't manipulate." Her breath caught slightly. "You speak truth even when it's uncomfortable." He paused. "And when you smile, I forget every pressure waiting outside that door." The confession lingered in the dim room. She blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. "You're not saying this because you feel responsible?" she asked. "No." "You're not saying this because you ended something else?" "No." He held her gaze steadily. "I'm saying this because somewhere between that rainy night and that staircase, you became important to me." Her chest rose slowly. "And you?" she whispered. "Became safe to me." The word safe changed everything. It wasn't passion. It wasn't desire. It was deeper. He stood slowly, still holding her hand. Then carefully he leaned closer. Not rushed, not urgent, just close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "If I kiss you," he murmured softly, "it won't be out of impulse." Her heart pounded loudly. "It will be because I'm choosing you." Her lips parted slightly. "You're sure?" "Yes." She studied his face. There was no arrogance there, no control, just intention. "I don't want to rush," she whispered. "We won't." Another breath passed between them. Then slowly he closed the distance. His lips touched hers gently. Not possessive, not demanding, just soft, steady, certain. Her fingers tightened in his shirt instinctively. The kiss deepened only slightly, enough to carry feeling, not enough to overwhelm. When he pulled back, their foreheads rested lightly together. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was full. "We'll take this one step at a time," he said softly. She nodded. "One honest step at a time." He brushed a strand of hair gently away from her face. "You deserve that." "And you?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "I'm learning that I deserve something real." She exhaled slowly. Outside the window, city lights flickered against the dark sky. Inside that hospital room, the world had shifted again. Not with violence, not with jealousy, but with choice. She leaned back into her pillows, still holding his hand. For the first time, she whispered, "I'm not afraid of tomorrow." He watched her carefully. Good. Her eyes grew heavy, exhaustion finally settling in. He stayed seated beside her long after she drifted to sleep, not because he feared she'd disappear, but because he wanted to be there when she woke. And somewhere in the quiet hum of hospital machines and dim hallway lights, the foundation of something lasting had been laid. Not built on rescue, not built on rivalry, but built on truth, spoken in the quiet. and neither of them would ever be the same again. The mansion felt different when they returned. Not physically, the marble floors still gleamed, the chandeliers still shimmered, the garden still bloomed in quiet elegance, but something invisible had shifted. When Ethan walked through the front doors with Amara beside him, one hand hovering protectively at her back, it was no longer employer escorting employee. It was partnership, and the staff noticed. Mrs. Lawson noticed most of all. She greeted them with her usual composure, but her eyes softened when she saw Ethan carrying Amara's small hospital bag himself. "Welcome home," she said gently. Home. The word wrapped around Amara unexpectedly. For months she had not had one. Now she stepped back inside, not as someone seeking shelter, but as someone chosen. The first week after the hospital was quiet, deliberately so. Ethan moved meetings to virtual calls. He shortened work days. He avoided unnecessary travel. And for the first time in years, he began spending evenings without a phone in his hand. Amara watched it happen in small increments. The laptop closing earlier. The tie removed without tension. The way he would sit beside her in the garden without checking notifications. "You're adjusting," she observed one evening as they sat beneath the almond tree. He glanced at her sideways. "Is that your teacher voice?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe." He leaned back against the bench. "It feels strange, slowing down." "Yes." "Do you hate it?" He thought for a moment. "No," he admitted. "I'm just not used to it." She shifted slightly, wincing as the baby kicked strongly. His attention snapped immediately to her. "She's active today." "She's always active," Amara said with a soft laugh. "She doesn't like being ignored." He placed his hand gently against her belly. The movement stilled him. There it was again. That protective instinct. That quiet claim. "I've been thinking about names," he said. Her eyebrow lifted. "You have." "Yes. That sounds serious." "It is." She studied him carefully. "What did you come up with?" He hesitated. "A name that means light." Her eyes softened. "Why light?" "Because she's the reason I see things differently now." Her throat tightened slightly. "You don't have to carry symbolism for everything," she said gently. "I want to." She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, cautiously, as if testing whether it was allowed. He didn't move away. Instead, he rested his cheek briefly against her hair. The garden held their silence tenderly, but love in private and love in public are different battles. The first test came unexpectedly. 2 weeks after her return, Ethan received an invitation to a high-profile charity gala. One he and Vanessa had attended together every year. He stared at the envelope for a long moment. "You don't have to go," Amara said softly from across the room. He looked up. "It's important." "So was your old relationship," she replied gently. He walked toward her slowly. "Are you uncomfortable with me going?" She hesitated. "Yes," she admitted. He respected that honesty. "I won't go." She blinked. "You don't have to cancel everything because of me." "I'm not canceling because of you," he said calmly. "I'm choosing peace. But people will talk. People always talk." She exhaled slowly. "I don't want to hide." He stepped closer. "Then don't." Her eyes searched his. "You're sure?" He nodded. "If we're doing this, we're not doing it halfway." Her heart pounded. "You take me?" "Yes." She glanced down at her rounded stomach. "I'm visibly pregnant. And it's complicated. It's real." The words settled between them. "Real." She looked up again. "You don't care what they'll assume?" "I care about what's true." "And what is that?" she asked softly. He didn't hesitate. "That I'm in love with you." The confession wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Her breath left her in a slow exhale. "You've never said that before." "I know." Silence stretched. "And?" he prompted gently. She stepped closer. "I'm in love with you too." The words felt terrifying and freeing. He cupped her face slowly, carefully, as if she were something breakable. "You deserve to be loved without shame," he murmured. "And you deserve someone who sees you beyond the headlines," she replied. He kissed her then. Not cautious like the hospital kiss. Not restrained, but still gentle, certain. When they pulled apart, the future felt less uncertain. The gala arrived 3 days later. Amara stood before the mirror in her room, adjusting the soft blue maternity gown Mrs. Lawson had helped select. It flowed elegantly around her figure, highlighting her pregnancy rather than hiding it. She looked radiant, but nervous. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she said. Ethan stepped inside. For a moment he simply stared. Not at the dress, not at the setting, but her. "You're breathtaking," he said quietly. She laughed softly. "That sounds rehearsed." "It isn't." He stepped closer. "You don't have to do this," he added gently. "I want to," she replied. "If we're stepping into this openly, we step together." He offered his arm. She took it, and for the first time since that rainy night, she walked beside him, not as staff, not as hidden, but as chosen. The gala was exactly what she expected. Cameras, whispers, eyes lingering. She felt them. He felt them too, but he didn't release her hand once. When a former business associate approached, his smile faltered briefly upon noticing her pregnancy. "Ethan," the man said cautiously. "This is?" "My partner," Ethan replied smoothly. No hesitation, no explanation, just truth. Amara felt something inside her steady. The whispers grew louder across the room, but she didn't shrink, because his hand remained firm in hers. Later, as they stepped onto the balcony for air, she exhaled deeply. "That was intense." He laughed softly. "You handled it better than most CEOs. I used to dream about classrooms," she said lightly. "Not this." He turned toward her fully. "You can still have classrooms." She blinked. "What? You don't stop being who you are because you're with me." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to lose myself." "You won't," he said firmly. "I don't want someone who disappears beside me. I want someone who stands." Her eyes filled faintly. "You're different from the man who lost that wallet." He smiled faintly. "Good." The music from inside drifted softly into the night air. He leaned closer. "Marry me." She blinked. "What?" "Not because of the baby," he clarified. "Not because of what happened." He reached into his pocket, not with a dramatic ring box, just his hand. "I want to build something with you. Intentionally." Her heart pounded. "Ethan, I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he said gently. "I'm asking if you see a future." She looked at him for a long moment, then placed her hand over his heart. "I see one." He exhaled slowly. Relief, certainty, and something deeper. They didn't need a ring to seal it in that moment. The promise was already there. When they walked back inside together, they weren't shielding themselves anymore. They weren't pretending. They weren't explaining. They were simply together, and somewhere beneath the chandelier lights and whispered speculation, a love born from integrity, tested by cruelty, and strengthened by choice, had stepped fully into the open. The contractions began at 2:17 a.m. Amara woke with a sharp tightening across her abdomen, not the familiar discomfort she had grown used to over the past months, but something deeper, intentional. She stayed still for a moment, breathing carefully. Another wave came, stronger. She turned slightly in the bed and whispered, "Ethan." He was awake instantly. That had become instinct. "What is it?" he asked, already sitting up. She swallowed, gripping the sheets. "I think it's time." For half a second he froze. Then everything moved at once. The mansion lights flicked on one by one as quiet urgency filled the halls. Mrs. Lawson appeared in the doorway, calm but alert. "The bag is ready," she said. Of course it was. Ethan had triple-checked it himself days earlier. Amara sat carefully at the edge of the bed as another Erda Gugrakshan Tautalid through her body. She inhaled slowly. "You're okay," he said, kneeling in front of her. "I know," she whispered. "She's just eager." Despite the pain, there was a faint smile on her face. He placed both hands gently over hers. "You don't have to be strong alone." "I'm not," she replied. Another contraction, stronger this time. Her grip tightened around his fingers. "Okay," he said, voice steady but edged with adrenaline. "We're going now." The drive to the hospital felt both too fast and too slow. The city was quiet at that hour. Streetlights reflected off the windshield as Ethan focused intensely on the road. Amara breathed carefully beside him. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. "You're doing amazing," he said softly. "I haven't even started yet," she replied weakly. He reached across briefly and squeezed her hand. "I'm right here," She nodded, and she believed him. The hospital staff moved efficiently once they arrived. Wheelchair, assessment, monitors. The same hospital room they had once entered in fear now welcomed them with anticipation. She's progressing well, the nurse said after the initial examination. But it will take time. Time. That word suddenly felt endless. Hours blurred. Contractions intensified. Amara gripped the bed rails. Then Ethan's hands. Then the sheets. Pain came in waves, powerful, consuming. But she didn't scream. She focused, breathed. Ethan never left her side. Not when her nails dug into his palm. Not when sweat dampened her forehead. Not when exhaustion crept into her voice. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured repeatedly. "I don't feel strong," she gasped during one particularly fierce contraction. "That doesn't change the truth." She squeezed her eyes shut. "This hurts. I know. You don't." He almost smiled despite the tension. "You're right. But if I could take it from you, I would." Her breathing stuttered slightly. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Always." By late afternoon, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she admitted, voice trembling. Ethan brushed damp hair from her face gently. "You can. How do you know?" "Because you've survived worse." Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. "That's not fair." "No." He agreed softly. "It isn't." Another contraction hit, stronger than the rest. The doctor stepped in. "It's time." Everything sharpened. Nurses positioned. Instructions given. "Push when I say," the doctor directed. Amara nodded weakly. Ethan held her hand firmly, anchoring her. The first push felt like fire tearing through her body. She cried out raw and unfiltered. "That's it," the doctor encouraged. "Again." She shook her head faintly. "I can't." "You can," Ethan said immediately. "Look at me." She forced her eyes open. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "You are not alone in this," he said firmly. "I'm here." She inhaled deeply and pushed again. Time fractured into effort, breath, pain, encouragement. Then, a cry. Sharp, high, alive. The room paused for one sacred second, and then it filled with sound. Tears blurred Amara's vision instantly. "Is she?" she whispered desperately. "She's perfect," the doctor said with a smile. Ethan's breath left him in a broken exhale. He hadn't realized he'd been holding it. The nurse placed the tiny, crying bundle gently against Amara's chest. The world stopped. Her daughter's skin was warm, soft, real. Amara let out a sob. Not of pain, but release. "Hi," she whispered shakily. "Hi, my love." Ethan stood frozen beside the bed, eyes shining in a way he didn't attempt to hide. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. Amara looked up at him. "She has your serious expression." He laughed softly, overwhelmed. "I hope not." The baby's tiny fingers curled instinctively against Amara's skin. Something ancient and powerful settled over the room. Life, pure, undeniable. After the nurses cleaned and weighed her, they placed the baby gently into Ethan's arms. He hesitated for only a second before accepting her. She was impossibly small, fragile, and yet the weight of her changed everything. He looked down at her tiny face, and something inside him shifted permanently. "Hello?" he whispered softly. "I've been waiting for you." The baby stirred faintly, eyes barely open. His throat tightened. "I promise," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "I will never let you doubt that you are wanted." Amara watched them from the bed, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. This was the man who had once measured success in numbers and negotiations. Now he stood undone by a 6-pound miracle. He looked up at her. "Light," he said softly. She smiled. "That's her name." "Light?" he asked gently. She nodded. Because she brought it into the darkest moment, his chest tightened. "Light," he repeated softly, testing it to fit. Later, when the room grew quiet and the nurses left them alone, Ethan sat beside the bed while Amara held their daughter close. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," she corrected. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "I have never been prouder of anything in my life." She smiled faintly. "You once closed $1 billion deal. This is better." She studied him carefully. "You're different. I know. Do you regret it? He didn't hesitate. No. He looked at their daughter again. She's not just yours, he said gently. She's ours. The word no longer startled her. Felt right. Are you sure? She asked softly. He met her gaze steadily. I've never been more sure of anything. Silence wrapped around them warmly. Outside the hospital window, evening settled over the city. Inside, 3 lives had permanently intertwined. Amara leaned her head back against the pillows, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. Ethan remained close, one hand resting lightly over hers and the baby's tiny body. We're going to build something beautiful, he said quietly. She looked at him. Not perfect, she added gently. He smiled. No, not perfect. Their daughter shifted slightly between them, but ours. And for the first time in her life, Amara did not feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning. The girl who once sat in the rain with a lost wallet had just given birth to something far greater than money could ever buy. Hope. And this time, it was here to stay. 6 months later, the mansion no longer felt like a place Amara had entered by accident, felt lived in, not because of the marble floors or the high ceilings, but because of the small human details now scattered everywhere. A baby blanket draped over the arm of a cream sofa, tiny socks abandoned near the garden bench, soft lullabies playing faintly in the evenings. Light had changed the house, and she had changed them. Ethan stood near the large living room window one afternoon, watching Amara in the garden below. She sat on a blanket beneath the almond tree, light balanced carefully in her lap. The baby giggled, a bright, unrestrained sound that carried even through glass. Ethan smiled without realizing it. This was not the life he had once planned. It was better. Amara looked different now, too, not in the dramatic way magazines portrayed motherhood, but in the quiet confidence of someone who had survived fear and come out steady. Her laughter came easier, her posture held strength, and when she held her daughter, there was no trace of doubt left in her eyes. Ethan stepped outside. The late afternoon sun warmed the garden as he approached them. Light spotted him immediately and squealed, arms stretching outward. He crouched instinctively, lifting her carefully into his arms. Well, that's my welcome, he said softly. Amara smiled. She's biased. I raised her well. You read to her. She corrected gently. Yes. He pressed a soft kiss to Light's forehead. Every evening, without fail, he read aloud. Sometimes business articles out of habit, sometimes children's books, sometimes passages from novels Amara recommended. It had started casually. Now it was ritual. You've been quiet today, Amara observed. He hesitated. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. That sounds serious. It is. He sat beside her on the blanket. Light settled comfortably against his chest. For months I've been building my life around survival and ambition, he began slowly. But I don't want to build this next chapter without intention. She watched him carefully. I've already asked once, he continued softly. But I want to ask properly. Her heart skipped. He shifted Light gently into her arms and stood. Then, without performance, without dramatic flourish, he lowered himself onto one knee. Amara's breath caught instantly. He reached into his pocket, and this time there was a ring. Simple, elegant, intentional. I don't want to marry you because of what happened, he said steadily, or because of Light, or because it makes sense. Her eyes filled slowly. I want to marry you because you chose honesty when it would have been easier not to, because you challenged me to be present, because you turned a house into a home. His voice softened. Because I love you. A tear slipped down her cheek. You don't need to kneel for me, she whispered shakily. I want to. The garden felt suspended in time. Amara, he said gently. Will you marry me? She looked at him, really looked at him, the man who had carried her when she fell, the man who had chosen her in public, the man who held her daughter as if she had always been his. Yes, she breathed. Relief and joy broke across his face at once. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose and pulled her carefully into his arms. Light squirmed between them, squealing happily as if approving the decision. Amara laughed through tears. I think she agrees. She has excellent judgment, he replied. The wedding was small, intimate, intentional. No press, no grand spectacle, just people who mattered. Mrs. Lawson cried quietly during the vows. A few close friends from Ethan's business circle attended, those who had witnessed his transformation with quiet surprise and respect. Amara wore a simple white gown that flowed gently around her figure. She didn't need extravagance. She needed sincerity. As she walked down the aisle, not alone this time, but with Light carried carefully in her arms, Ethan felt something settle deep in his chest. Peace. When she reached him, he took Light gently and handed her to Mrs. Lawson before taking Amara's hands in his. The officiant spoke softly, but Ethan barely heard the words. All he saw was the woman who had once stood in the rain, choosing integrity over desperation. I promise, he said when it was his turn, voice steady but emotional, to never let you question your worth. Her fingers tightened around his. I promise, she replied, to stand beside you, not behind you. There was no need for elaborate declarations. They had already proven their commitment in harder moments. When they kissed, it wasn't for show. It was confirmation. Life after the wedding did not become perfect. Light cried at inconvenient hours. Ethan still struggled to fully detach from work. Amara still battled moments of fear when things felt too good, but they faced those moments together. Months later, Amara stood in the nursery watching Ethan gently rock Light to sleep. The man who once lived inside a silent mansion now smiled at every tiny movement their daughter made. You never imagined this life, did you? Amara asked softly. Ethan looked at her. No. Do you miss the old one? He considered the question before shaking his head. I was successful, but I was never fulfilled. Amara leaned against the doorway. So you found fulfillment in chaos? I found it in you, he corrected. She crossed the room and rested her head against his shoulder. Ethan looked down at their sleeping daughter. And all of this happened because you returned a wallet. Amara laughed quietly. It was one small decision. It wasn't small, he said. It was everything. Years later, Light would grow up hearing the truth about her mother, the pregnant woman who once sat alone in the rain with nowhere to sleep, found enough money to change her life, and still chose honesty. Ethan would teach her that character is what a person does when no one is watching. Amara would teach her that love begins when honesty becomes stronger than fear. Their mansion was no longer silent. It filled with laughter, birthday celebrations, quiet evenings, and the sound of tiny feet racing along the staircase. The place that once held loneliness became a real home. Sometimes, late at night, Amara still stood by the window and remembered the storm, the hunger, and the heavy wallet inside her trembling hands. Then she would look at Ethan beside her, and their daughter sleeping safely down the hall. It was worth it, she would whisper, because life's greatest turning points rarely arrive with warnings. Sometimes they appear quietly, disguised as a choice between what is easy and what is right. Amara had once owned nothing, but she refused to lose the one thing no poverty could take from her, her integrity. That choice did not merely change her circumstances, it changed her destiny. She found love, she found family, she found light, and this time, none of it disappeared.